Welcome to the Dave Palma Show, the podcast that revives, restores, and awakens your innermost capabilities.
You have the training and the talent to succeed, but do you have the guts to fail?
I love what I do. When you love what you do, you want to be the best at it.
Today is about the power of you. You will change the world.
Find your path to success through the journey of those who have succeeded. And now, your host, Dave Palma.
Hi, welcome to the Dave Palma Show. And with me in this episode, I have someone who's an internationally recognized trainer and top-rated keynote speaker, worldwide certified facial emotion coder, a gifted storyteller, and is the author of Leadership Lessons from the Pub. Irvine Nugent, welcome to the Dave Palma Show.
Thanks, Dave.
I stumbled over your surname there. I should always get it cleared up. Is it Nugent?
It's Nugent.
Nugent. Okay, yeah, that G always catches you out with. Anyway, So I know you're from Northern Ireland originally, but you're in the States. Well, that's really your home. Really,
it is. Yeah, I'm based just outside of Washington D.C. And I've spent more time over here than over there, but I grew up in Northern Ireland. Yeah.
All right. Well, Washington's quite an interesting political place to be.
But it was.
There was a lot of drama there in the beginning of this year in January, wasn't there? So you could say that it came back. It followed you from what was going on when you was young in the Northern Ireland.
Trouble always follows me somewhere.
Exactly. Well, talking about that, I mean, obviously, you're doing some great work with what I've just introduced you through, and also we'd like to talk about your book a little bit as well, or as long as you want. But it's quite interesting time because obviously you can see with my accent, I grew up, born and raised in London, so probably around the same time, there was quite a lot of troubles, you could say, going on that came to London as well as in Northern Ireland, where obviously it had a lot of military there then as well. Yeah. So to sort of a bit like what's going on in Afghanistan, but a different kind of situation.
Yeah, different level. Yeah.
That kind of military thing needed to be there. It's not anymore. But tell us your story of that there first, of you growing up and what you had to overcome. A little bit.
Yeah, so I am we were practically the same age, Dave, and my generation had a name to it, and we were called Children of the Troubles because they began in the mid to late 60s, and really the backdrop to childhood, to really adolescence, was the Troubles, which was kind of, when you think about it, a really gentle way of really describing the fact that there was armed conflict and violence and bombings and shootings. And we lived in a border town, and when I was 6, I grew up in a pub. Thus the book. But and we lived above it, so we kind of the pub and below. We lived above it. And
where was the pub? Was it right in the city? Because I've been to Belfast, so I've got more of a recent, 7 years ago.
Yeah, so the pub was in a little village called Ballamagorry, which is right on the western part of Northern Ireland. It's about 15 miles from Derry, kind of a little small, on kind of not too far from the border. So.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So it's not Belfast then. It's
no. On the other side. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, when I was 6, my parents had gone to Belfast for a shopping trip. They came back, and in the evening, I'd already gone to bed. Yeah. But that evening, two IRA gunmen walked in, placed a bomb on the counter, and gave everyone 5 minutes to get out. And so while customers were fleeing, my dad went upstairs. He managed to get alert my mother and 4 sisters, and then I was the last person. He grabbed me from bed, ran down the stairs to the other side of the road. And we literally, my memory of that moment is being embraced by him and the bomb going off, and literally the place burning in front of us, and being left with the clothes in our back. And
so that obviously you heard the bang, and that must have been
everything. Yeah, and I think for me, there's two memories. One is actually heat. So it was just I can remember the heat of just the fire, and I remember my father. And he raised a clenched fist, and he said in this like really deep voice, watch me build again, and he was just, it stirred him, into action. And that the story really is that in the following week, we all kind of dealt with it in our own ways. Because a 6-year-old, I can remember going back to school and actually thinking I was famous because we've been on the BBC News, and no one from Ballamore had ever been on the BBC News. So I kind of thought, everyone was kind of interested. Oh, we saw you in the news. And so you kind of go into that mode. But my father had managed to get a tent. He got some booze, he got music, and villagers brought furniture. And a week after, he had set up a tent and a functioning pub in the other side of the parking lot, which to me just screams resilience and screams like, this is the way I respond.
All right. Okay. So that's kind of like, because they say like from the age of say 7 onwards, that's kind of the way you're always going to see the world, from onwards. So your brain's developing still,
Absolutely.
The right and left brain of the, so that's near the time when you would have been set up for that emotional intelligence to set you up, isn't it?
Absolutely. And really, kind of, there's many different ways you can go. You can live in fear. Yeah. But kind of part of the resilience of growing up in a place like Northern Ireland is you get on with life and you make a choice, and you make a choice that despite what's going on, life goes on. And that's the lesson my parents taught me, my sisters taught me, and no matter what's happening, life goes on, and you show up.
So you're saying you could go various different ways. So you had a really good way of managing your emotional triggers, and your work is around emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose really we could just talk about that, your journey there, and how the lessons you learned from that you could teach other people, the audience now, what you've learned, how they can manage their own emotional triggers.
Yeah, it's a great question. As in writing the book, one of the things that I kind of is, where did this come from? And I think, part of what I learned is growing up in that situation, there was just this deep, almost curiosity within me of why do people do what they do? Yeah. And why do we react the way we do? And, at the core of that is just our emotions and our ability to manage our emotions, our ability to embrace them and help them deal, with the different situations we're in. And I've done that in my career in a number of different ways. Actually, the first part of my life, I was a Catholic priest for 10 years. Right. And
you was with a Catholic priest, or you was?
I was, yeah.
Oh, right, I see. Yeah,
I was, yeah. And I that's what brought me to the States. And
I see. Okay.
Yeah, and I did untraditional work. I worked with refugees from the Guatemalan Civil War. Yeah. And then I ran a large charity agency, Catholic Charities. And kind of then that brought me into the whole leadership, and kind of I felt unprepared. Yeah. And so then some of the I did a doctorate then in management, and some of the research that I dealt with leaders in crisis and how we use emotions in crisis. And really then that spurred the present work that I do, which is mainly working with organizations and leaders and trying to help them embrace their emotions, to help them understand that their emotions are there as something of indicators of key information. Yeah. And emotions can help them make connections, make better decisions, have greater influence, and really influence the outcome of any situation.
Right, I see. So you Catholic priest for 10 years, and then what kind of made you, I mean, obviously that's quite a good thing, as well as you're doing some humanitarian work at the same time, obviously there was a lot of stuff going on in Central America, in certain countries anyway, wasn't there? I was out in Costa Rica, I think in around 2004, and there was some guerrilla warfare in, I think it's Honduras or something like that.
Yeah. Well, it's like between El Salvador and Nicaragua and Guatemala, they're all kind of, at some stages flaring up.
So, I mean, obviously that also kind of like, got you kind of all round shaped for the work you're doing now. How did that develop from your 10 years of doing the...
Yeah, kind of one of the gifts, I think, of priesthood is that you're actually placed in moments of great sadness and moments of great elation. You're surrounded by emotion, working with people fleeing a war as well, kind of... You come encounter of resilience of the human spirit, but then also kind of the trauma and how to deal with the trauma of that. So that really placed me, as I transitioned out of priesthood, with a fascination once again of how, so often we get into a language of emotions, that emotions are bad or good. Yeah. And I always say that's not helpful language. I always say, if we look at our emotions as something that can be constructive or destructive in any situation, and as to how we use it. And emotions are they're data points. They give us information in the moment. And if we're intelligent enough to read those data points, it's amazing how we're able to manage the situation we're in, how we're able to manage our triggers, how we're able to manage the memories that come up that have a lot of emotional load. And so all of those are key really to better living and to showing up as better human beings.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I mean, emotional intelligence is a big topic. I mean, there's EQ they call it. Oh, no, EI, isn't it?
EI,
EQ? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, both are kind of EQ is technically kind of the assessment when you're assessing it. It's EQ, but then the broader term then is EI for the field.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly, in recent times. Well, obviously, I'm not talking about what's happening in Afghanistan because this is, as we're speaking now, this is the most recent kind of crisis. But of course, the whole world was in this pandemic, and the lockdown and everything. So there's certainly a lot of stress and anxiety be going around. I mean, how do you lead in those anxious times? We've seen some various different types of leadership going on, from when the pandemic started. But what would you give your 2 cents about this?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is to understand, first of all, what the situation is. Very often as human beings, our first priority is to survive.
Yeah.
And this pandemic was an experience of survival in the sense of, and to really understand that we were told that by our very act of interacting, that there was an invisible virus which we could catch that potentially was deadly. Yeah. So for the human person, then that sets us into almost a constant flight or fight situation. Yeah. And when we're in that situation, our functioning is not as good. And so leaders have to realize that. I think, when I was working with leaders during this pandemic, the first thing to realize was that everyone's experience of this was different. Even though their living situation would be the same, how they were experiencing that was very different. And to recognize that and not to paint broad pictures of how people were coping or not coping. Yeah. I think listening became imperative. I think, this ability to make people feel that you are present to them and listening to how they feel is incredibly important, because when people feel heard, especially in anxiety like this, it helps them function a little bit better. And then I think part of leadership then is to realize that how you show up is incredibly important. So, organizations or systems, they're kind of like cobwebs. And so one person impacts the rest of the organization, and a leader does that way more. And so your level of anxiety is incredibly important. So if you show up highly stressed, highly anxious, that is going to impact and feed everyone around you. We literally catch the emotions of others. Yeah. So part of the work that I did during this time is really being methodical on how you're showing up and make sure that you're sowing the moods and emotions that you want in the whole organization and the wider. Because what was happening is, of course, people were kind of feeding of each other and this emotional frenzy, and it was kind of riveting up and really helped, becoming more anxious.
Yeah. Wow. Well, obviously, we're talking about leading in these anxious times, and you've led on to writing a book called "Leadership from a Pub." Now, I do have a very big American audience, and some might say pub. Well, they probably might be aware of the word pub and know it's a bar. But I'm quite well versed with pubs because obviously I used it with my colleagues when we socialising and stuff like that. So I now know that you grew up in a pub, so that's probably where we're going back to the beginning. When he's talking about what happened. So tell us more about the book.
So really the genesis of the book came from listening to leaders in my work, and basically them saying, here's what's happening in the workplace. People feel disengaged. People don't feel connected. Turnover is high. And then I thought, well, what's a good, and the more I thought about growing up in the pub, because the pub is this unique environment. In many ways, you bring up the differences between Britain and the US, and it's not just a bar. A pub is more than just where you go to get a drink.
Yeah,
the pub is, we call it our local. It's the place we belong.
It's abbreviation for public house. So it's like going to someone's house, and it's designed like that with the carpets and nice armchairs, and that's not typically what you see in chairs like that. Soap comedy cheers.
Absolutely,
It's
yeah.
not like that, is it?
No, and I can remember my growing up, my father used to say, I said, Irvin, I'm not in the business of selling drink. I'm in the business of providing a home.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting.
All right. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So this atmosphere, and so there's things that happen in a pub that are really interesting. When you look about, first of all, there's a level of equality there that people socialize, and class doesn't, or position is not as important. And then the second thing is vulnerability. You don't feel that you have to go to a pub with your airs and graces. In fact, if you do, you'll be knocked down pretty quickly. And really, people feel that they can go with their problems and be listened to. And there's a great saying, in Ireland, that if the pubs closed, we'd have to double the population of psychiatrists. Because it's a place where you process.
That is like what happened in the UK, in the whole of UK.
Yeah.
Pubs were closed for almost until July, just gone.
Absolutely.
And I think they was there late. I think there was a certain way you could order food, but it wasn't the same, was it?
No. And it helps that whole emotional equilibrium is part of that. So then I got fascinated with, I think the pub has lessons for us as leaders in organizations and just in people in general. So what the book really focuses on, it focuses on different elements that we see in the pub, and then how does that apply to leadership, and specifically about emotional intelligence. Because I think really in a pub, you're managing all different types of people. And as a manager or barman or barwoman, I often think some of the most emotionally intelligent people I've ever met in my life are people who have served in a pub, because they're constantly looking at people, they're managing, they're talking to people. They come with great emotional skills. And I think, really in many ways, that's what a leader is. A leader is kind of managing all these different people around them.
And all kinds of things can go on, Sometimes,
absolutely.
Sometimes you get undesirables coming in, or you get too drunk, and it's things like that.
Yeah. I mean, because part of the book is so it's not all roses. Part of the book is conflict is real, and how do you deal with conflict? And at times you have to bar people, and at times you have to deal with relationships that go sour, etc. But that's all part of the human process.
And like you say, it's in a kind of social setting. So like when you're barring someone, it's kind of like it's almost like you're telling a friend, look, I don't want you coming to my house anymore, rather than telling someone at an office, look, you're banned from this office. It's a kind of different feel, isn't it? Of how
it is, and it's
managing it.
It's personal. And I remember my dad agonized many times over people, who he had to. But I think the thing he always learned was that. As bad as he felt, people appreciated it, because there was trouble being sown. And at times, like in the workplace, there's some bad apples. And at times we kind of, we fear conflict and we fear not getting involved. But then all of a sudden a leader gets involved, does some action, and people think, thank God they did that, because this person was driving me insane, or this was impacting the whole workplace.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, actually. So those lessons are quite important. I mean, the thing is, I worked in the fire service most of my life, so it was similar kind of thing. We sort of ate food together, and it was sat down at the kitchen table, we call it in America, but the mess table, and it was more of a family feel. But obviously, the TV room in the evening, it was relaxing, but the daytime it was doing lectures and training, theory work of the firefighting. But it had that same kind of family being in a house feel. As well. So my workplace was kind of, that not the same environment as a pub, but it was more. No, I wouldn't say informal, but it had more than just going in an office and sitting down. Although I did work in an office part of of that.
Yeah, absolutely. But you have those like a lot of time when there is kind of a bonding experience and happening. You had opportunities in there. Like I think police officers as well, kind of very similar as
your life depends on each other, you see, and the teamwork is very, 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 it has to be tight like that. So that's the reason behind
trust is
trust
there. Yeah.
So that's probably how that was all kind of developed, really. And then of course, especially in the fire compared to the police, we're kind of sitting, around more doing stuff. Whereas police officers have to go out a lot, because they're managing the whole streets, aren't they? We're only going out if there's an actual,
fire.
Like what you saw, the fire, that sort of thing, really. So, well, not only the fire, there was other things, car accidents and and things like that. But anyway, I don't want to talk about my job. What I'm trying to do is relate to how you manage to put your book and relate it to the workplace, and that emotional intelligence side.
Yeah,
Bonding
because it does. I think most people. It's very interesting. I just listened to the news last night, and one of the things coming out of COVID is a dramatic increase of people who are quitting their jobs, who are looking for something else. And I think, people have begun to rethink about what is work about and what is life about. And I think, COVID has impacted us in ways we're only beginning to understand. And so therefore, I think, leaders and organizations have to rethink as well. What am I creating here? And people are looking for something just a little bit more than just, click in, click out and go home. What they're looking for is a place to belong, a place where there's some form of meaning, et cetera. And I think that requires a different level of emotional intelligence, and it requires a different level of emotional intelligence from our leaders.
Yeah. So as much as people didn't like the lockdown, do you think that kind of gave them some downtime to think more and,
I do. What I experience is, it's interesting. I experienced it. I myself experienced it in waves. When it first started, it was like, well, this will be 3 months. And then it was kind of this realization, oh no, this is going on a long time. And then it was always like having to recalibrate expectations. Yeah. And then, now in the US at the moment, we've got I think you went through this maybe a month or 6 weeks before us, the resurgence of Delta variant again. Yeah. And so now it's like, oh my God, are we actually going backwards, not forwards? So
that's right.
A lot of emotions going on with that. But I do think, people got to spend time with family. People, I know people who have kind of then, what's important? Is it important that I'm working 13, 14 hours a day? Yeah. Or is it important that I have a balanced job and I'm with my family? So, questions like that. Or I actually enjoy working at home. And when I go back to work, I still want to be in the office, but maybe not 5 days a week, maybe only 2 days a week. So all these questions, and people, found new hobbies, new pastimes, et cetera. So I do think in spite of the difficulties of being locked down, people almost were forced to get to know themselves and to be alone. And that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. It's interesting you're saying. I mean, obviously the Delta variant has come, and they call it the third wave, but of course it's gone around the world again. But really, I mean, the flu's doing the same kind of thing. It comes, you've got different strains every year. So I'm sure that they should work out something there. Well, obviously the UK's come out of it completely now in terms of lockdown. They're looking at another way with the vaccines and that. But they should now be able to manage it to say, well, look, this is going to be the same as a flu. We're just going to have to deal with different variants coming, or strains. The vaccine's already developed. So I think the situation should really phase from locking down all the time to let's push these tests and vaccines out and keep the
I do. I agree with you, and I think it's about resilience, and it's about being able to function with these things around us, and it's reality. It is. I mean, this is not going away, and I'm sure in 3 or 4 years, I don't wish this, but I'm sure something else is going to come up. There always is something that comes up, and I think part of that is being prudent and wise at the same time, also knowing that we have to function.
Yeah. I mean, it's necessary at the beginning to completely lock down like that while they just try and work out where it is and how to deal with it. But they're at the stage where they've now got more information about it to really, sort of just try. But anyway, various different countries of leaders have dealt with the crisis in various different ways. But obviously from the advice of the World Health Organization, so there was some kind of cascading to each country or state. And that was interesting times. What lessons would you say from the lessons of your work and book would you say you could sort of relate with the work you're doing with what leaders could be doing, or
so I mean I think part of this is when you have a triggered organization or a triggered people that you're dealing with, you got to understand that there's certain impacts into how we function. And so one of the things that begins to is that our thinking is diminished. In other words, and we want quick fixes, and we tend to are unable to be curious or unable to. We want quick decisions, etc. So I think what the balance there is. So first of all, to be able to have this calm presence in the face of anxiety is incredibly important. People need to feel that, because it kind of almost. We call it a step-down transformer. So it almost brings down the level of anxiety, which is really important. Right. And then the other thing, is just to make, emotional intelligence is important for decisions. So at times, we delay decisions because we think that it might get kickback, or at times we make quick decisions too quickly. And I think, if you look back in COVID, I think, that there are times when we made decisions far too quickly. Or there are decisions that we made that we just we delayed them too quickly, we delayed them too long. So I think part of that, but I think the functioning of a leader is really important there, because I think people feed off that, and how that shows up is important. And the leader needs to be present. There's kind of like at times you can be too distant, and I think there has to be the right amount of presence as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that brings me on to another thing, and I'm quite intrigued by it when you mentioned about calming the face and everything like that. Is your work around facial recognition and emotion, doing emotion coding? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so what we know from the science of affect and from our emotions is that our emotions are incredibly quick. And so when we have an emotion, what happens is there's a whole process that begins. And part of that process, of course, is physiologically. We feel it in our body.
Yes.
And then we show it, of course, in our face. That's one of the places we show emotions. Yeah. And even before we are conscious that we're having an emotion, it's already beginning to show in our face. Yeah. So you can learn to do two things. First of all, you can learn to read an emotion as it shows up in the face. So say, for example, Dave, I'm angry at you and I want you to know I'm angry. Then you're going to see and learn to read anger in my face. And most people can pick that up naturally. But what's wonderful as well is that, say if I'm trying to suppress or hide my anger, by the time I'm consciously doing that, some of it has already leaked out. We call them micro expressions. And you can learn to pick those up as well. And so they're incredibly important data points. This really helps us get a feel for what a person, what emotion they have in the moment. Now, what we don't know is why they have that emotion, but we know pretty surely that we know that there are also 7 universal emotions. So no matter who we see this in, where they're at culturally, we know that that's a genuine emotion that's being expressed. And so that is surprise and fear, anger, contempt, disgust, happiness, and sadness. All of those 7 emotions, no matter where you are culturally, or what country or what sex you are, those emotions show up the same way.
Yeah. And certainly, some of the pubs that where you've got music and socialising, certainly lots of body language and facial expressions going there as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually, it's funny you bring that up. Like, my father had never been formally trained, but boy, was he fantastic at knowing the signs of anger and then the pre-signs of potentially a conflict situation in a fight. And actually, he used to say, he said, when someone's had too much to drink and they get angry, he said the monkey comes out. And what he meant by that is kind of, the way you kind of, you puff up and you're kind of egging someone on.
Yeah.
And it was so true, of course, because they know this is one of the signs of anger. And in fact, anger can get out of control very easily. So absolutely. Knowing that sign and then knowing when to intervene because this is not going well.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, at the end of the day, because he's seeing it, so he's seeing patterns all the time.
Yes.
So that's the same thing that's happened with that, same body language with that and same facial expression. So you sort of learn it, but through, just being there and because he has to watch it all, what's going on.
Absolutely.
Really, as a manager, really.
Yeah.
Oh, you've probably seen a few things like that as well.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. In fact, one of the most my dad, he's passed now, God bless him, but he was a big man, and I mean like just a broad and as thick, and as we would say in Ireland, and he had this ability just to kind of lift a person and kind of throw them up literally by the back of their necks, by their clothes. I mean, he was incredible, but he knew when exactly to get involved. And, and experience had taught him that. And actually, you mentioned, Dave, a really important word there is patterns. We all have patterns. So how emotions show up is patterned. And that's part of being really good emotional intelligence, is being able to kind of maybe look back on a regrettable incident, like why did I say that, or why did I do that? And then to take that experience and to say, well, what was going on and what was the trigger? And why did I do that? And that curiosity really helps us grow in our emotional intelligence. But what we begin to see is some patterns. It's like, oh, this keeps showing up. When this happens, I do this. And knowing those patterns is really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all this is very, interesting stuff, trainable for managers to use. And, when they're staff training, and especially when it comes to interactions and things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Conflict
because
resolution, things like that.
People will, in the face of change, we have patterns. Some people will do, in the face of conflict, some people will shy away. Some people will stuck in. And so we all have these patterns, which are very observable and really give us data that's important. Yeah.
Could help with them intervening certain things, with workplace issues and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Maybe there's a conflict with the manager and, the employee and,
and then to know, what I like to say is to know your own conflict story. So at times, how do we deal with conflict? Are we people who kind of like, I don't want to get involved, and we put it off to the very last moment? Or are we people that maybe get stuck in too early and kind of really, when we should let people resolve their own conflict, and so knowing that pattern in our own life is important too.
Yeah, great, fantastic. Well, Irvine, what have you got going on for you now? I mean, I know obviously the world almost sort of kind of froze for about a year and a half, but in general, I mean, you must have probably still been able to do a lot of your work, from.
Yeah. So part of that, when COVID came, I had 5 or 6 months of business totally wiped off the books because it was all in person. So part of that initial was transferring everything to virtual, which I did. So I do a lot now of virtual speaking, virtual training. Wrote the book, of course, during COVID. That's kind of was a nice little time. Yeah, it was one of my COVID projects that I've been meaning to do and never had time. Well, I had lots of time. So I did that. But I still do a lot of keynote speaking and training, and most of it now is virtual. Although, next week I go to New York for a 3-day engagement, and that's going to be in person. So we're beginning to see kind of coming back to in-person events.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. That's great stuff. Well, it's good. It all works out. It's like this podcast really got popular during, a lot of podcasts did it, but virtual speaking, it really sort of, it really got popular. And, I was quite glad of the way it grew so quickly during the period. I mean, obviously, I don't want to sort of say I was glad the pandemic happened, because obviously it's not something people wish for. But, people's way of working or whatever, they did manage to pivot, or naturally, had a new normal way of doing things, didn't they, really?
Absolutely, yeah. And, I know myself, I mean, kind of, I kind of listened to 1 or 2 podcasts, but I know then I kind of explored during COVID, kind of the world of, and I even noticed like an uptick in friends saying, hey, this is you should watch this or listen to this or listen to that. So it was people did, kind of, I think I can understand why podcasting kind of, because it's a casual conversation, you get to know some. And I mean, I know kind of your podcast, we have a lot of interesting topics, et cetera. And so it's just generally interesting to people.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Well, Irvine, it's been really, really great hearing these, this side of emotional intelligence. Obviously it's a word that's bantered around, and especially with, dealing with resilience and, crisis and conflicts and stuff like that, which obviously, you had the humble beginnings of seeing that, firsthand and develop there. But it's a great pleasure coming on the show. And where can people find out more about you and your work you're doing and everything, the book? And I think you've got a course as well coming up.
So just irvinenugent.com, my name, put .com there, you'll go to my website, you'll find the book. If you put irvinenugent.com/gift, there's a free e-course for people, Introduction to Emotional Intelligence. And then if you've liked the content on YouTube, every week I come out with an educational video every Wednesday. So just put my name in YouTube and you'll find it there. And I deal with everything from resilience to dealing with anger and dealing with a bad boss. All these topics are dealt with as well.
Wow, excellent. Well, Irvine, it's been a great pleasure having you on the show and having this amazing conversation around this topic. So thanks a lot for coming on the show and discussing this.
Dave, appreciate the invitation. Thank you so much.
That's all for this episode. Thanks for listening, and remember,
If you want to support what we do, then share, subscribe, and leave a review over on Apple Podcasts. Or head over to my website, davepalmer.com, and click on Rate Show. Well, that's all for now, but I'll see you in the next episode of The Dave Palmer Show.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.